series here at the Great Sarasota Chamber of Commerce. We've got a great collection of our members on the call today, and we are truly honored and excited to have Colonel Hoffman with us from the Sarasota Sheriff's Office, and soon to be in November, the official sheriff of Sarasota County, replacing Sheriff Tom Knight. Before we dig into today's program, I'd like to invite Kelly Monty from our office to share a few things, some protocol for us to make today's event a success.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Just a few guidelines for a meeting this morning. You may want to put your view on speaker view. That way you will see the Colonel as he's doing his presentation. Also, if you would please remain on mute until the end of the presentation. Please ask any questions in the chat box, and then Heather will address the questions to the Colonel at the end of his presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. Well, we'll go ahead and jump right in, and I will let you know that we will have a few minutes at the end of our presentation today. If you do have questions, please submit them in the chat like Kelly mentioned, and we will be sure to get them over to Colonel Hoffman to address for us this morning. So without further ado, let me introduce just who it is who is on this Zoom call with us today, because this gentleman has an incredible and impressive background, and we are so lucky to have him here in Sarasota County. Currently, Colonel Hoffman is the Chief Deputy. He's the second in command of the agency. He also serves as the General Counsel and has spent more than 30 years working in the criminal justice system. He has a Bachelor of Arts in Criminal Justice from St. Leo College, a Master of Science in Criminal Justice from International College, and a Juris Doctorate degree from Nova Southeastern University. He is a former State Prosecutor, a graduate of the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center's Police Legal Advisors Training Program, and also a member of the Florida Bar's Labor and Employment Law and City, County, Local Government Law sections. In 2011, he completed the FBI Florida Executive Development Seminar, and in 2014 graduated from the FBI National Academy, during which time he also earned a graduate certificate in leadership from the University of Virginia. So this guy has just an armory of experience and education, and we're going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Colonel Hoffman.
Well, thank you, Kelly and Heather and the Chamber. I'm excited to be here, and thank you for that nice introduction. It reminds me that I need to shorten that up a little bit. There's too much information there, but yeah, I've spent quite a bit of time in academia, and I really enjoy learning and speaking to folks. And although the campaign is over, this is another opportunity to kind of get out and talk to some great folks in the public and your members of your chamber. So thank you, Kelly and Heather, for that. So I guess I'm the CEO and this is the Joe. So I was told it was informal, so I brought my Indianapolis Colts mug here with me. I thought what I would do today is just for your listeners is kind of go over a little bit about the Sheriff's Office, maybe a little bit of history, kind of what we're doing here at the Sheriff's Office, some pretty cool things, and then how you can interact with the Sheriff's Office and be part of what we do in terms of protecting this community. So just to kind of start out a little bit of history of the Sheriff's Office, next year will be 100 years that Sarasota County has been a county, right? So that means we've had a Sheriff's Office for 100 years. And as Heather mentioned, I will be taking office, although it's not November, Heather, it will be January. All the county commissioners take office in November. The constitutional offices will take office in January. So I will be the 11th sheriff of Sarasota County on January 5th, and I'm really excited to do that. For those of you that don't know, I've been with the Sheriff's Office for 16 years, and as Heather mentioned, pushing 32 or 33 years in law enforcement, some of that as a state prosecutor here in the 12th Circuit. So I've just been privileged to serve really the citizens of this county for almost 3 decades. A little bit about the Sheriff's Office so you guys can kind of get an understanding of how we're structured. So the sheriff's office has three main divisions, right? You have the citizens first that we respond to, obviously the sheriff, you have me as the colonel, and then under the colonel, you have three divisions in our agency. The traditional division that you're probably most familiar with is our law enforcement division. And that's because those are the guys and gals that are out there patrolling your streets in cars and in boats and in the air with our aviation unit and do a variety of things. We have a very robust special operations section here at the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office that does a lot of cool things that you might not be aware of. We have a SWAT team, an emergency response team for post-hurricanes. We have a dive team. We have a bomb team. We have an aviation unit. We have a traffic unit. We have a school safety unit that is working in some of the schools. As you know, the school board has taken back their law enforcement functions in all the public schools, but we still have deputies in a lot of the private schools and in the charter schools, so we still do that. Then we have our traditional patrol section in the law enforcement division, which I mentioned is, the cars that you see out there coming through your neighborhood. And then we also have an investigation section within the law enforcement division. Have almost 70 detectives across the hall and down one floor from me here in our headquarters building on Cattle Ridge Boulevard that do a variety of investigations across the county, across the state, and we actually have some that are worldwide in terms of fraud and security issues and internet crime and things like that. So very robust law enforcement division. The second section of the agency is our courts and corrections division. So I think most of you know the sheriffs in Florida, for the most part, with the exception of a couple of jurisdictions, operate the county jails. And we have a county jail here in Sarasota County that is under the control of the sheriff. As of this morning, we have 871 inmates in the county jail. The county jail has a capacity of 1,036. So you would think, oh, well, you have a little bit of room there in the jail. But actually, when you think about a jail setting, it's our responsibility to keep juveniles away from adults, males away from females, gang members separated from each other, co-defendants separated from each other. So really when you get into the 800s, 850, 860, 870, you really are reaching your operational capacity in your jail because you have to separate those folks. Juveniles, we have some juveniles in our jail that can't be around adults. So that's always been a topic during Sheriff Knight's administration for the last 10 or 11 years, that jail. And I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing to try to keep that population down and help our citizens. The other part of that division is the courts division. So you might not know we have over 300,000 visitors a year in our basically three courthouses that we have, or court facilities that we have around the county. We protect all of the judges, and by law, the sheriff has to attend all sessions of the circuit court. So if the judges are in session and the courts are in session, you will see what we traditionally call bailiffs. We call them court deputies, and we have about 70 folks that work all of those various courtrooms around the county. Then the third section of our agency is really the glue that keeps us all together here. It's the administrative division. It's our finance, our human resources, our information technology, all of those functions, our quartermaster, accreditation that makes sure that we are living up to the standards of modern law enforcement agencies. And really that section, that division permeates all parts of the agency. So those are the three pillars that run directly under my supervision as the colonel. I have about 1,000, a little over 1,000 employees that report to me every day, and 870 inmates, as I said. So some days harder than others to keep track of all that's going on. And obviously we have almost 450,000 citizens out there that we're responsible for their safety. So just a couple of quick fast facts about the sheriff's office you might not know. We took in 640,000 calls to our 911 center last year. We're on pace to take in almost 700,000 by the end of 2020. And that includes emergency calls, non-emergency calls, and we even do text to 911. We've been doing that for about a year and a half now. So for folks that have difficulty being able to call in, you can text in. And I'll just give you an example. We had a domestic violence case recently where somebody was hiding in a closet and couldn't use the telephone, but they were able to text and communicate with my dispatchers. We were able to get deputies over there and get into the house and protect that young lady without her having to make a phone call. Or in some cases, criminals will, cut the phone lines or do other things to make it difficult to place a phone call. You can now text to 911. So 700,000 calls coming into that center is a pretty awesome responsibility. I like to refer to my dispatchers and my call takers, which we have over 100 of them in our center, as the first responders, right? They're the ones that take your call. They give CPR instructions. They make sure that the deputies are protected out there. They're following up when we go to calls to monitor us. So they are really your first contact with the agency, and they do an awesome job. We drive about 7 million miles a year protecting you with over 680 patrol vehicles that we have in unincorporated Sarasota County. It's a fairly large county, and obviously we have jurisdiction anywhere within the four corners of Sarasota County. So that's a question that comes up often is, what about the cities? Well, the cities have their own police department, obviously Sarasota, Longboat, Venice, and Northport. But we have jurisdiction countywide. So we have jurisdiction in those cities, and we often help those cities because they, particularly the smaller ones, don't have the resources that we have, and I can talk about that in a little bit. Last year, we did 800 hours of flight time across the county. For those of you that don't know, we have two aviation units, two helicopters. They are the only aviation unit in Sarasota County. So they're able to help all of those municipalities that I just talked about, whether it's water rescue, whether it's a couple weeks ago, we were doing fire suppression. Both of our helicopters have the ability to fight fire, and we help the Forestry Service. And then obviously those are an overwatch for all of my patrol deputies when there's a pursuit, or they're chasing somebody through the woods, or somebody is, burglarized a house and now they're fleeing. The eye in the sky, if you will, is an extremely important function. We recently found 2 Alzheimer's patients that had walked away from their homes, and we can get that helicopter up in about 2 minutes from Venice Airport, get them airborne day and night, and use that for the eye in the sky. And that's really an important function for us. You might not know, we also run animal services for the entire county. So out at the end of Bee Ridge, we have an animal services office where we do adoptions, and we do the animal services function for all the municipalities. So if you have an animal issue, or a stray dog, or a barking dog, or you've lost a pet, it's generally going to be funneled in through the sheriff's office, and we do that for all of the cities. A very important function that we provide in this modern day and age is our digital forensics unit. So I'm sure everybody's familiar with CSI and all those crime shows, and those are pretty cool, fingerprints and DNA and all of that. But really where the technology is going and how we're solving crime is with these devices right here, right? Every crime has some type of digital footprint, whether it's an iPad, an iPhone, a smartwatch, CCTV, thumb drives, all of these different electronic devices, hard drives. My digital forensics unit can analyze those and get all kinds of data to help solve a crime. I'll just give you an example. We had a recent attempted homicide case where the suspects actually shut their phones off about 900 feet from the scene of the crime, thinking that they weren't going to be able to be tracked, because obviously you have GPS and Google services and all of this stuff that goes to the cloud that we can subpoena and get to solve crime. But they didn't shut off the fitness app on their watch. So we're able to take the GPS coordinates that when they shut the phone off, overlay those over the fitness app, which they didn't shut off, and then count the about 880 steps the fitness app showed, and it put them on the front door of where the shooting occurred. And the gentleman that was wearing the watch actually confessed he wasn't the shooter, but that then got the person who was with him to confess. So that type of technology and being able to solve that, not all agencies have a laboratory like we have. We've probably got, I was down there yesterday, we've probably got 20 or 30 devices on a shelf that we are, through court order, we're not doing this, just to peek into folks' devices, but we have a court order, and all of those devices are awaiting our encryption devices to try to get into them to solve everything from child pornography to financial crimes. So a very important function of what we do. I want to tell you a couple things that really make our sheriff's office unique. And I was talking to Heather before we went live about, what my administration is going to do. And it's going to be a lot of the same because we've been very successful in our policing strategy. So anybody that's been to our website or seen me speak knows that we have a program called Intelligence to Action. So what do? We identified like who the worst of the worst criminals are in our county, and we focused on those individuals in an effort to try to reduce crime. And over a 10-year period, we've dropped violent crime by 52%. We've cut it over in half. So that policing philosophy has been very successful. I like to always describe it as Minority Report, right? With Tom Cruise, remember that movie? We're trying to find the criminal at the closest inception to the crime before they victimize other people, and then get that person off to prison and make our community safer, and we've done that. So Intelligence to Action has been very successful. On the backside of that, we have all of these wonderful programs in our jail that help people change their lives. If you're not familiar with our pods, we had the first addiction recovery pod in the state of Florida, and we've helped a whole host of folks turn their life around, beat their addiction, and live successful lives. We also have a mental health pod, a veterans pod, and a reentry pod that helps with job skills. So I'm extremely proud of the jail programming. In fact, I think going forward, what we're doing in the jail may have a bigger impact on quality of life and crime reduction than anything else we're doing. And the final thing I'll leave you with is I want you guys to be able to contact us and to interact with the sheriff's office. So from a social media standpoint, we have a very robust YouTube channel. Go on there and see what we're doing out in the community. Sheriff Knight made a commitment to expand our community affairs office here at the sheriff's office. I'm in our studio right here where we do a lot of our broadcasts and community events. So go to sarasotasheriff.org is our website. You can find links to our YouTube, Twitter, and our website obviously has a lot of information as well. I will tell you that we have a sheriff's app where you can get a lot of information. You can check on who's in jail. You can get weather reports and that kind of thing. So go to the iTunes store, type in Sarasota County Sheriff's Office app, and you can get that. And my final plug, on December 5th, we will hold our third annual open house here at our headquarters. So we invite everybody to come out. We'll have hamburgers, hot dogs, we'll have our horses, we'll have our SWAT team, we'll have our robots from our bomb unit, our helicopter will be here, our motorcycles, bring the kids and interact with my deputies. And it's just a really fun time for the community and an opportunity for us to interact in a positive way with the folks that we serve. So hopefully, Heather, that stimulated a question or two.
We do. We have a couple of questions coming in. One question asked, what are, the preventions, with COVID-19 going on and the prison population? And obviously, that has been a huge, issue, in prisons. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, and just so everybody knows, obviously prisons, when you talk about prisons, those are folks that have been convicted and have gone to state prison, right? So the difference between a jail and a prison, obviously, the majority of the folks we have are pretrial detainees. So they've not been convicted of anything. And they're a little more short-term in terms of their stay. So what we did, and the Florida Sheriff's Association has helped us with this, is to get all the necessary PPE equipment that we need to protect our staff and to protect the inmates. And we had been doing extremely well up until about a month ago. We did have an individual that came in from another jurisdiction, it appears, and we had a little bit of a COVID outbreak in this second wave. But I will tell you, we've processed over 4,000 people in our jail since the COVID outbreak, and we're still below about 1.5% positive rate. So it's still significantly low. And in terms of, to your question, Heather, we created an internal isolation unit where we were isolating folks initially for 14 days before they went into general population, and then we extended that to 30 days. We've given every inmate has 2 masks that are laundered on a rotating basis. We clean each of the pods twice a day. We're taking the temperature of all the employees and vendors that come in and out of the facility. And we've been very successful. In fact, yesterday, we just opened up transporting inmates between counties. In other words, we were keeping all of the inmates. If I picked up a person who had a warrant from Hillsborough County or Leon County or the Keys, we kept that inmate here and didn't transport them so that we wouldn't be moving COVID patients around within the state. We're just now starting to exchange prisoners now that we all have the same protocols in place. The exchange will be safe, and we'll get those folks back to the community in which their court case is going to be held.
Great. We had another question come in terms of, what is the threat really of these protests happening in Sarasota? You look at communities like Portland, Oregon. We did have some protests here in Sarasota, but they all seemed, for the most part, respectful and going through the process of their, their liberties to be able to express themselves. But could you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. So I'll start with the latter part of your question, the constitutionality. I'm as a former constitutional law professor, I'm very big on protecting the constitutional rights of our citizens. So we wanted to make sure everyone could exercise their First Amendment rights and do it in a peaceful fashion. So we had 13 demonstrations total. And I'm proud to say we didn't have a single arrest. We didn't have any violence whatsoever. And there's two reasons for that. One, Sheriff Knight met with one of the larger protesting groups, and we kind of set the ground rules to let them know that we were there to protect them and make sure that they could exercise their First Amendment rights, but that we weren't going to tolerate any criminal activity in what we're seeing around the country. And then I met with a second smaller group and delivered the same message. So that's part of, I think, why it went so peaceful. The second thing, Heather, is I think what some of these communities are lacking is community interaction before the crisis, right? When you have the crisis and you try to scramble around and get community leaders to support you, we have a very robust community affairs office, as I said, and Sheriff Knight and I, particularly on the north end up here in Sarasota, have got community leaders that we can call and did call and enlist their assistance in helping facilitate peaceful demonstrations. So it went off without a hiccup, and I would anticipate that it would continue in that fashion. Somebody asked me, how do you prevent what happened in Portland? You prevent it by not letting it happen in the first place, right? Laying all that groundwork ahead of time to have the community support behind you, to meet with the folks and make sure we're all on the same page in terms of our expectations. So I anticipate that will continue.
Yeah, that community support is so important, and that we're all working together in tandem, the business community, right, lock and step with law enforcement.
Sure.
I do want to encourage anyone, if you've got questions, please do go ahead and put them in the chat. I did want to touch base. I saw a presentation, Colonel Hoffman, a few months ago on some of the things that you're doing to prevent, child trafficking, that type of thing. You showed some apps. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. So if you go to our website, or if you even Google now, because everybody has stole our idea and put it all over the United States, but we have a document called 21 Apps That Parents Should Know About. And what we did is we've done 7 operations to protect our children from these predators, and those will certainly continue. And with COVID, it's a little difficult to get these operations together because obviously this involves the suspect traveling to a place and meeting with what they believe is a child for the purposes of sexual activity, and the logistics of that. For anybody listening out there, it doesn't mean that we're not watching and we're not monitoring, but we are going to continue with those operations, Heather. And what we found in doing 7 of these operations, we found folks that were already listed as either sex offenders, sex predators, folks that were on probation. The last group that we did, we had an individual who showed up with methamphetamine, zip ties, and duct tape, and you can let your imagination figure out that that's not going to be a good ending if they are meeting with what they believe is a 12 or 13-year-old child. So we're committed to continuing those. But the 21 apps that parents should know about came about because as we stepped back and looked at all these operations, we ask ourselves, how are these folks communicating with our kids? And some of them are the traditional TikTok and Craigslist, but there are a lot of apps on that document. When you Google it, you will see, and if it has our star on it, that's the original one. If it has everybody else's star on it, that means they stole it from us. But essentially, get your hands on that document and look and be aware of what your kids have got on their phone or your grandkids and what they're using, because even some of the apps that have a legitimate purpose also have a purpose for the individuals to try to reach out to kids. One of the ones, when you look at that document, there's a calculator app, and when you press on the percentage key on the calculator, it opens up a hidden door where your children can file share with people. And they may think that they're talking to somebody about gaming or about something innocuous, but these folks are looking to try to contact our kids and then meet them somewhere. And bad things are going to happen when that occurs. So we're going to continue that, and we'll make sure that our kids are safe here. My brother is a FDLE agent, and when you get those Amber Alerts on your phone, my brother is actually the one that's pushing those Amber Alerts from Tallahassee. So he and I work together, and I've got a good connection there for the latest information we need to be able to protect our kids here in Sarasota County.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I know I was shocked, especially, and you touched on it, the calculator app. I mean, how benign for your kid to download a calculator app on their phone. It really is just frightening. So I think that's phenomenal information. I'm seeing everyone who's on the call today, and I know there's a lot of young parents on this call today. So that's really, really good information to share. We did have a question come in regards to the recent merger of First Step and Coastal Recovery and those collaboration efforts, and wondered if you could talk a little bit about that and how it applies to the sheriff's office.
Yeah, so they've always been a good partner for us in terms of helping us externally and also with jail programming. And I know PJ Brooks has recently left there, but we had a long-standing relationship with PJ. Gwen McKenzie was here in our office the other day talking to us about some programs. And I think one of the things that we want to do going forward, you probably saw in Clearwater and other parts of the country, trying to figure out a method to embed mental health providers, counselors, practitioners into law enforcement. It just gets a little dicey when we're the ones that have got to go in and kind of stabilize the situation first. And I'm not in favor of some of these programs that send the civilians into these dangerous situations. I know there was an Atlanta police officer, I think last week, that was stabbed in the face on a basically a routine kind of mental health check call. So those are very dangerous calls. But I think there's a model, and we're working on it now, where once those calls are stabilized, that we can have those folks come in and assist us. And I think First Step will probably play a large part in that. The good thing about Sarasota County when it comes to whether it's addiction counseling or whether it's mental health counseling, all of these things, we're a very robust community when it comes to service providers and 501c3s that are willing to contribute, whether it's Gulf Coast Community Foundation, the Barancic Foundation. All of these organizations have been very supportive of the Sheriff's Office. We couldn't do the work we do. In fact, our care pod in the jail is specifically devoted to mental health. So I mentioned I had 870 inmates. Over 300 of those inmates identify in some form or fashion with either a substance abuse problem or a mental health issue, many of them both. So the care pod is the collaborative approach to reintegration through education. We're trying to help get those folks back on their medication, get them into a stable environment, and then when they leave the jail, we have 2 navigator positions that will help them look for housing, for jobs, to get their driver's license, to set up their financial obligations and that kind of thing. So the providers like First Step and Coastal are huge in those folks being successful when they get out. Because what are we trying to do? We're trying to prevent recidivism, right? If we can make them successful, turn their life around. We took 10 of our worst offenders that accounted for 190 arrests, put them through the addiction recovery pod, the reentry pod, and they've been out 15 months now. And we've had one arrest out of that group. So it is a huge, successful program.
That's very impressive results. And, you know, the mental health issue, I think that's going to continue to be a conversation in our community, you know, both from a city and a county perspective, and how do we address those needs? You know, and it's not even just a social welfare issue. It really is, you know, like you said, 190 arrests. It's a fiscal issue too.
Yes. So every one of those arrests obviously means there's a prosecutor, there's a judge, there's a public defender, there's an officer, there's a clerk of the court, all of these things that have to come together for one single arrest. So to go from nearly 200 to one, knock on wood. In fact, some of those folks that have graduated are now coming back and teaching in the pod. And I would add as well, for those of you that don't know, we have a homeless outreach team in Sarasota County that's just doing fantastic work. To date, we've contacted over 600 individuals in a little less than a year and a half since it's been in existence. We have 2 deputies and we have 3 caseworkers that are going out. And that's, again, what I was talking about before, Heather, is there's a law enforcement and a caseworker combination that are going out and triaging those cases together. I don't want to send the civilians out into the woods literally to deal with these folks, but they go out with a deputy that's specifically assigned to homeless outreach. Last week we had a gentleman, and you might have saw it on our Facebook page, social media, been living in the woods for 20 years. Now has a roof over his head. He has furniture donated, clothes on his back. He's working on getting Social Security and disability benefits. And it's just one of those success stories of many that my homeless outreach team has been able to accomplish. So when people talk about, I'm always bristle a little bit about this defunding the police, because they're trying to defund, I think, to do social work, which is good. But you have to look at the pods we have, the homeless outreach team we have, the navigators I just spoke about that help people once they get out of jail. A lot of the things that they want to defund the police for, we're doing here in Sarasota County, and we're doing it very successfully. And one thing, if anybody knows Sheriff Knight, when we started having these discussions about who was going to do it, we had too many meetings, and he said, Kurt, we're going to do it ourselves, because I'm tired of talking about it. I want to go out, get this homeless outreach team going. Let's get the pods in the jail going. And really, we haven't looked back. We've helped probably thousands of people with both of those programs since we've implemented them.
Oh, well, great work. That's such an important part of keeping our community going forward. And I know that that's an important topic for, you know, our businesses as well.
Sure.
We did have a question come in. As Sarasota's population continues to grow and climb, what do you anticipate, you know, crime to look like? And what are the type of crimes as our population grows that you're going to be most focused on?
So after we instituted intelligence to action, we kind of took those worst of the worst offenders out of our community. What it did, it allowed us to start focusing on some of these quality of life issues. So I think going forward, there's really going to be a 2-pronged approach, and we're getting ready to start our 4th edition of our strategic plan, which will be my responsibility to get our next 4-year plan up and running. So what I've been thinking about with regard to that plan are 2 areas: those quality of life issues where we've got a drug house in a particular neighborhood, or we've got homeless issues or whatever. And we're very fortunate to have those issues. I don't have a robbery task force, a homicide task force, a carjacking task force, because we don't have those kind of crimes for the most part in Sarasota County. But what we do have is those quality of life issues, which now we're going to be able to focus on those and go into the neighborhoods and address those. The second thing I touched on briefly, Heather, are these crimes involving digital devices, whether it's you know, getting into people's bank accounts, identity theft, whether it's luring our children over the internet. The digital side of crime is evolving, and it's making it harder and harder for us to be able to reach out into cyberspace and catch these individuals. I'm sure everybody on your call has probably got one of those Nigerian bank emails, and a lot of those are coming from China and from Russia and from South America, and they're difficult to track down. We actually made some arrests, not we, but state of Florida made some arrests on some Nigerians recently. That's one of the first cases, because they're so difficult to trace them all the way back. But we have a very robust digital forensics unit here, and our detectives are all trained by the United States Secret Service to be able to get into this technology. Was actually testifying the other day with Congressman Stubbe on passing some legislation to make it a little bit easier to be able to prevent people from using electronic devices in a criminal nature. But I think going forward, Heather, we're going to have to get on top of these devices. There are people that are anonymously committing crimes. We had a identity theft in Miami of a Department of Children and Families employee, stole over 2,000 identities in a computer database. And then what they did is they took those and created fraudulent credit cards with them. And they sent about a half a dozen people out across the state to start making purchases on those fraudulent credit cards. So somebody would call her and they would say, I need a Hispanic male in his 40s. And they would get somebody that looked like that. They'd go get a fake driver's license, a false credit card. And they went to UTC here and spent about $40,000 on the credit card before we caught them. And because we have that digital forensics laboratory, we found out that that ring that was running out of Miami, we arrested 7 people, had been in 17 other jurisdictions and not been caught. But because we had the capability to get into their devices and actually track them around the state, download the text messages and a lot of the credit card activity on their digital devices, we were able to make a case. So that's the kind of stuff going forward that we're going to have to be able to do in this agency in order to stay ahead of crime.
Yeah, you know, for the business community, I know that's a tremendous issue. I even personally had an experience, you know, where someone called and said, hey, I'm with Verizon, I need your PIN. And, you know, it even showed up on my phone as if the call was coming from Verizon. And so, you know, it's happening quite a bit. I think, like you said, that's going to be a continued trend.
I held the driver's license in my hand that they created to use to open the credit card accounts. You couldn't tell the difference between my driver's license and the ones that they created because the printing technology is advanced as much as anything else as well. So we've got to stay on top of that. We've got good trained people here. We just added one more detective to that unit. And I think we're able to handle about anything they throw at us.
That's great. I think we're going to need it. I also know I see some of our South Tech friends on the call, and they certainly help keep us protected as well. So
excellent. Appreciate that.
We did get a kudos in the chat, just saying, you know, kudos on the homeless issues that you talked about a little bit earlier. And the question was, are you sharing those best practices, you know, with your colleagues across the state? Because those are some pretty impressive statistics.
Yeah, so we are. So our homeless outreach team has, excuse me, done some education at different programs around the state and around the nation, but we stole a lot of that from other jurisdictions. We went to Los Angeles, we went to Portland, we went out east. We sent those folks out and said, you know, find out what's working and what's not working. So those are not necessarily originating from the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office, but yeah, in fact, they did a story on us in the Florida Sheriff's Association magazine, so other sheriff's offices can emulate that. You know, the difference between like the city homeless population, those are a lot of hardcore homeless folks. I find ours in unincorporated Sarasota County, particularly after this COVID, are a lot more families or single moms or kids. So we've got to kind of take a different approach. We've got to help those folks get housing, get some job skills. I know recently we drove all the way to Fort Myers to find housing for a husband and wife and their 2 kids so that they could kind of get back on their feet again. So really it is best practices, but it's also the dedication of the men and women in that unit. They are really committed. And we didn't shut that unit down during COVID. We took precautions, but we knew those vulnerable populations are even more vulnerable during the COVID outbreak. So we're trying to make sure that they had access to medical care and other things that we take for granted. So I'm really, really proud of those folks.
Yeah, you definitely should be. We had a comment in the chat about the Sarasota Sheriff's Foundation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I appreciate the opportunity to plug that. Sheriff Knight created, or actually the businesses created the foundation at Sheriff Knight's behest. And what they do basically is throughout the course of the year, we have one main fundraiser, which is coming up in November. It's a clay shoot down at the Knights Trail Gun Range. And this organization does amazing work to collect funds to help my deputies. For instance, we had a corrections deputy, her house literally burnt to the ground. She got out with the clothes on her back. So some of that stuff wasn't covered by insurance. We have a couple employees that are family members are battling significant cancer events, and a lot of the incidentals are not covered to and from Ronald McDonald House and housing and those kind of things. So the foundation steps in. There's a board that will vote on whether or not they will assist the employee. So it's not the sheriff's office making the decision. It's not the sheriff and I. We'll get those requests from time to time. We'll submit them to the foundation, and the foundation will step up and help us. In some cases, they've paid a mortgage. They've helped with transportation costs. They've helped with supplemental insurance. In the case of my corrections deputy whose house burnt to the ground, they actually provided her enough money to be able to put a down payment on another house for her family and her children. So I can't thank them enough. They've helped a lot of my employees who've had catastrophic events well beyond what our health coverage would cover.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we are coming up on, the bewitching hour. I did want to just say, first off, on behalf of, the business community, you and the entire team are doing an incredible job for our county. We are so grateful for you, for your service, for your dedication, for protecting all of us. I hope you know that, the majority, we are here supporting you, cheering you on. And let me just kind of wrap up today's session with what can we be doing as the business community to better support your efforts?
Well, I think, if you follow us on social media, we try to let people know what we're doing in the community. And I think sometimes it's hard to kind of brag about yourself. And that's really my job. The men and women out there are working 24/7, 365. I have 1,000 of them. Christmas morning, there'll be 50 people out here working when everybody else is taking off. So if you see a deputy, if you see somebody in a white uniform with a badge, that's going to be one of our civilian employees. Really just go up and thank them. I tell people all the time, this is the best community to serve in, Heather. So if you see one of those folks out there, just say thanks. That's all that they really need. And if you can support the foundation, that helps us as well. But follow us on social media, because I think when you get a narrative out there about law enforcement, you say, no, wait a minute, I follow them on Facebook. I saw where they rescued a guy offshore the other day who a boat that overturned. I saw him put a fire out with a helicopter. I saw where a dispatcher, saved a baby by doing CPR instructions to somebody. If you're educated about what we do, then you can communicate that to other folks. And I guess one other plug I'll give you, when COVID kind of breaks, we'll go back to our regular schedule. We do a Citizens Law Enforcement Academy where you come here and you embed with us for 9 weeks. We do it on Thursday nights here at headquarters. We'll come in, we'll give you a presentation every Thursday night about what we do, much more in detail than what I've talked about. You'll be able to go down to the gun range and see kind of the weapons we have. You'll be able to see the helicopter. You'll be able to go over to the jail and walk through that jail and see those programs for yourself and how clean that jail is. Our last accreditation report from the jail, we got a 100% on our report card. I'm very proud of that. So go to our website, look for Citizens Law Enforcement Academy. I think we're signed up through the spring, but sign up for the next one. Come visit us. We'll let you do a ride along at the end of your 9 weeks. You can go out on patrol and meet the men and women that are out there protecting you. So that would be, we'd be honored to have you in our house.
Oh, that's great. Well, maybe we could, coordinate a special chamber academy.
Yes, and the chamber from time to time and the leadership classes around the county will come in, and we will put a presentation together, usually over at our Emergency Operations Center, which includes the helicopter, the jail, and a tour of our Emergency Operations Center. Happy to do it.
Great, wonderful. Well, we, again, thank you so much, Colonel Hoffman, for being with us. Count us in, keep us on the red line for anything that the business community can do to support you and your entire team's effort. Thanks to all of you for being a part of today's Zoom call, and our CEO and Joe. I'm going to turn it back over to Kelly from my office. We just want to share 2 upcoming things that you're not going to want to miss. So Kelly, go ahead and jump on.
Okay, thanks, Heather. Next Thursday, we do have a Chamber University at 9 a.m. And the topic will be how to know when it's time to step away from day-to-day operations and focus on the bigger picture. And we will be having a in-person power hour lunch. So it's going, this Attendance will be limited. It's going to be held at Gecko's on Clark Road in Honore, and that's going to be held on Tuesday, September 29th. So you may register for these events, and we have some other exciting events coming up. So please check out our website, sarasotachamber.com. And thank you for attending today.
Great. Have a great day, everyone.